Well, good morning. How are you all today? Welcome to Integrative Preparedness, where you come when you're tired of all the fear porn and people trying to scare you all the time, and when you've outgrown the need for that stuff and really want to start learning about being prepared and building a better life, right? Okay. Well, today I want to talk about economic collapse and throw you some truths about economic collapse. I see a lot of other channels, yeah, it just kind of depends on what the worry and the fear of the day. One day it's Syria, the next day it's Ukraine, and when those kind of fizzle out, well, let's get back to economic collapse, right? Because that's gonna get everybody titillated. Well, there are some truths about this, and amongst all the splashing and the fear, there are some things that for those who are truly interested in preparing and building a better life, regardless of what happens, uh, we're going to talk about that. Just to say something before I go on with this, some people have asked, why should we come over to the Patreon channel? Good question, because I always invite people. I say, if you're not with us on our Patreon channel, come over. You'll learn a lot. We cover a lot more over there than we do on the YouTube channel. After I get done with this one for YouTube, for instance, I'm going to be doing a review of the Duluth. I've kept it in the package of the Duluth. Well, I'm going to cover Fire Hose Flex Pants. An honest review of those. I did one of the bearskin tactical hoodie the other day. I'll give you a hint on that. I'm not pleased with those at all. What else have I done? Yesterday, I think I did how to get in and stay in shape as you get older. I talk about the perfect place to live before and after a collapse, just those kinds of things. And then anything that I put on about guns, a lot of self defense, stuff about organized crime, those I reserve for the Patreon channel. So if you are interested in that extra, there's a lot of extra content besides having probably the smartest bunch of people on YouTube or Patreon or anywhere. The group that we have on Patreon is just unbelievable as far as both their knowledge base and their willingness to help other people. So if whether you're an advanced preparedness minded person, PMP as we call them here, or whether you're the newest beginner, you'll either be able to get something out of that channel or you'll have an opportunity to share your expertise with others who need it. Okay, so that's my invitation to everyone to join us on the Patreon channel. The link is right down below, and it doesn't cost much either. Okay, let's talk about economic collapse because there are those in the preparedness world, as you know, who can never be happy, right? That it's their bread and butter, that it always has to be a major problem. And there are major problems. That's what we prepare for. Okay. There are potential major problems. That's why we prepare. But you know what? The PMP, and if you're new to me here, it's a term I hate the term prepper. It to me it describes kind of a lightweight, kind of a beginner, kind of a limited, a shallowness, a limited understanding of both the threats and the challenges of the world and what it takes to get ready for them. And I prefer the term that I coined, PMP, preparedness minded person or preparedness minded people. So preparedness minded people understand that anything can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And sometimes very bad things do. Very challenging things, sometimes horrible things can happen to people. And that's why we want to do everything we can to mitigate those by preparing against them, preparing for them. But they also realize that this is not the average day of the person. Okay, most days go along pretty even, right? Not terrible things happen. Hopefully, if you live a good life and you are properly involved in preparedness, every day is positive. Every day is good. At the end of the day, you go, That was a good day. I got this accomplished. I got that accomplished. This good thing happened. That good thing happened. I have to be honest. That's the way my days are. I can't remember the last bad day I had. I know that sounds horrible, right? And sadly, occasionally when I'll say things like that, people will come on and say, "Well, not everybody's as lucky as you." Well, I don't know about luck. I've been fortunate, and the good Lord has blessed me, but it's because I have done the things that it takes to ensure that my life runs well. Okay? That's it. That's what I want to talk about here. So while I see that some other people are screaming about possible economic collapse and why you should buy gold and why you should do this and why you should do that, let me throw out a truth about economic collapse. There are those who live their lives in, to one degree or another, perpetual economic collapse. Simple as that. It's the result of the decisions they make. They live, and I tell my kids and I tell other people, don't live, don't operate too close to the edge. Those people are living too close to the edge of their money, too close to the edge of their abilities, to the extent that they have developed those abilities. I'm not saying you shouldn't, push your abilities. The thing is, if you're living at the edge of your abilities, you need to increase your abilities, right? So you're not on the edge of them. Uh, and these people, it's just kind of the life that they know. But that is not a preparedness lifestyle. A person who is constantly worried about economic collapse or whatever has not prepared properly. We hear the news items occasionally about the average person couldn't come up with $1,000 cash or $500 cash, whatever, if they needed it. And that seems to be the majority of people. And I have to ask, and I've known plenty of people like this. I mean, I have known people who is just every day is a new financial challenge or disaster, and how am I going to make it through this, and how am I going to make it through that? And I have to say that I've always been impressed. It's kind of like homeless people. Do you ever wonder how homeless people live? I mean, they do. They survive down in the city, and not just in the city, but in the suburbs. There's homeless people in small towns. Uh, how do they survive? Well, they have mastered the art of surviving at the very base level. Okay, they can live under a bridge. They can live in a hobo camp. They can live in an abandoned building. They can live in a park. They can live all sorts of things. And they get their food from dumpsters or soup kitchens, or the church that has the food pantry open, and they have mastered that ability to go from one resource to another. None of those resources of their own making or their own building, but they rely on the resources that they glean from the drippings of society. Let's just put it that way. And they do survive. And it's the same with people who are always going from one seemingly economic catastrophe to the next. How am I going to make my rent? How am I going to make my car broke down? How am I going to do, I can't afford another car. I can't do this. And I see this too often among preppers. I don't see it among preparedness-minded people, those who live a life of positive preparedness. But it's kind of the sense of the type of preparedness I've talked about before. It's all kind of negative. Is going back how to live in the woods. Well, I don't want to live in the woods. Do you? You don't want to live in the woods. I mean, I have, but it's not my preferred state. We, over thousands of years, have developed into abilities to have nice houses and indoor heat and indoor bathroom and hot running water and all sorts of things. We have and so I don't see the attraction of focusing on going back. Now, it's important to be able to survive those situations, but here again, those situations are just being survived. They're not being really lived. They're You're not building anything. And so while I know these people who are always, well, let me finish the thought there before I start the new thought. And I hear the message of, well, be able to work on your own vehicles and be able to do this. And so often now there are some who can work on their own vehicles, right? When they started putting computers in, I don't know how many computers my car has or my truck. And we have 3 SUVs. They all have computers all around them. Okay. My oldest is my Excursion. Uh, it's a 2000. I love it. I'll probably never get rid of it. There's some things I'd be able to fix, but not, a lot I can't. And so the idea that you ought to be able to work on your own vehicles, while good, you're going to be limited how much you can unless you are a mechanic. Okay. And I'll say something else is that most people who work on their own vehicles, and not putting them down. I mean, you can go out and do a quick brake job and something like that. But too often the ones who kind of follow that path, they go for the older vehicles, and to be honest, they're worn out, they're unreliable, unless you keep them top notch. And I know there are some who keep them top notch, but most don't. And so they end up spending a lot of time trying to fix their vehicles when they could have spent that time probably better doing better financially themselves, so they can take it down, drop it off of somebody who's, well, we have one of our vehicles to our mechanic right now, and he's checking something. Well, he already fixed it last night. I'm taking another one out today to have him check on something there. I'm taking another one out the next day to have something checked on there. You see, I don't have time to lay out in my driveway and fiddle with this stuff that I don't know exactly what the situation might be. I happen to have a mechanic who's a genius, right? And gives me a good deal. So my time is better spent doing what I do rather than, trying to figure out how to make the old buggy work. And again, thinking about, the kind of person who's always thinking the negative here again, and we're going to get to economic collapse. And when they have to take a trip, they so often have to go rent a vehicle. Why? Because they don't trust their vehicle on a long trip. You see, that's not preparedness. Preparedness means your stuff is in good shape. You can rely on your stuff. See, if you need to bug out, going to Avis and rent, is Avis even still around? Hertz, whatever. I don't even know who rents cars anymore. Enterprise. Going to rent a car from Enterprise is not the plan. You should have something ready to go and keep it tip-top shape. So there are those. That's an explanation of so many out there who are always living at the edge, just barely making it. Okay, and that's not where you want. And those are the ones who are always preaching economic collapse. And they do that because they keep themselves in a perpetual state of almost economic collapse. Now, the truth is this: there were others that will never experience economic collapse. And then there's a lot in the middle, who are the ones that won't experience economic collapse? Well, those who have stayed up on the state of economics in the world, who understand it, and who have built a financial base that protects them from the fluctuations of the greater economic markets, or the financial markets. Makes sense? Okay. To those people, it's like, okay, so the dollar's losing some buying power. Bitcoin is going up or down, whatever. It doesn't affect me. Inflation is driving food prices and fuel prices up. And a lot of people don't even realize that rising prices and inflation aren't the same thing. See? Inflation it drives the rise of prices, but the rising of prices is not inflation. It's simply the symptom of inflation. And if they don't understand what inflation truly is, they don't understand some of the basic things about the economic system that will help them make decisions in their life politically. Okay. So whether a person experiences an economic collapse depends not on the world, but on them and how they have prepared. Okay. Remember what Rush Limbaugh, for those of you who are fortunate enough to used to have watched Rush, he would say, and at the time I found it unusual because he was the first one that I ever actually heard say it in words. He says, I don't care about inflation. I don't care about a recession. I'm just not going to participate. Now, to the person who doesn't take the bull by the horns and take responsibility for their own financial strength and preparedness and foundation, that sounds weird. And they would say, well, what do you mean? How do you not participate in a recession? It's something that happens to you. Okay. I mean, prices go up and people lose their jobs and people lose their houses and people lose their cars. There was a great thing. I've been watching this show Landman with Billy Bob Thornton on it. Kind of interesting. I don't really get into shows. I just thought that I would watch Taylor Sheridan's latest thing and see what it was about, because I haven't been impressed with his other stuff. I wasn't. I thought that Yellowstone was silly. There was some good stuff in there. With that King of Tulsa or whatever was Stallone in it. That was stupid. Whatever else. I didn't much like 1923. 1883 was not bad. But anyway, so I thought I'd watch this. And there's a scene in there where Billy Bob Thornton, who's an oil man. He's not the big guy. He's kind of the field manager. And he's explaining to somebody what happens to a boomtown during a bust. And he goes through the whole litany. I won't be able to do it as well as he does. Maybe I'll try to find the clip and put it on Patreon, or you can find it yourself. And he says, when there's a bust, when there's an economic downturn, it affects everybody he doesn't say this, but it affects everybody who's not prepared. Now, it doesn't affect the big boys or the prepared people. He says, people lose their jobs. They start eating worse. They can't afford the same quality of food. They lose their houses. They lose their cars. They lose their marriages. What else does he say? They stop going to the doctor because either they lose their health insurance or they can't afford it. And it talks about how an economic collapse just devastates people. Those who are prepared, it does not devastate. They are prepared. They don't put all their eggs in one basket. Okay? As I've often said, you've heard me say this if you've been there with me before for very long, have multiple income streams and have them in areas that wouldn't be hit by the same things in economic fluctuations. Okay? And I could tell my own stories about this. I won't right now. This is going to go long enough. But whether you are affected by economic collapse depends entirely on you. Entirely. And that means you insulate yourself from the fluctuations of the financial markets. Simple as that. How do you do that? Man, that'd take a long time, but you can figure it out yourself. Here's the one thing. Increase your income streams, take responsibility for and take ownership of your own income. As long as you're working for somebody else, you can. I mean, there's people making, if you're making $300,000-$400,000 a year on your pay stub, yeah, you're doing all right. You can use that. You can rely on that, and you can build up a big enough buffer and nest egg to survive economic downturns. But most people don't do that. Most people are, within the 50,000 to 100,000 area, and that's very difficult to build out much of a buffer in that. You can do it, but you got to be smart. But here's the thing to realize. Economic collapse, they can come in all forms. They can come in all flavors. They can hit countrywide. They can hit worldwide. They can hit industry-wide. They can hit all sorts of different ways. But how it affects you depends entirely on how prepared you are for it. Increase your income. And that's something that too many preppers hate to hear, because it's like telling preppers to lose weight or get in shape. It takes effort. It takes discipline. And to be honest, most preppers are like most people. They lack they lack the discipline, and they lack the willingness to put in the effort. You know, you are guaranteed. I used to tell people this who I trained. You are guaranteed the effects of the causes you choose. Okay, you know the old cause and effect, right? Well, you are guaranteed the effects of the causes you choose. Whatever you put into, however you prepare or fail to prepare, you are going to live the results of that, of those efforts, or the failure to make those efforts. So it's up to you whether economic collapse affects you. Doesn't have to, but it does take effort. You need to increase your income. You need to increase your numbers of income streams from a variety of different sources, so that if you lose one, okay, I lost one. I've told the story. I'll make this real quick. Years ago, Kelly and I had a bunch of newspaper routes. We made great money, unbelievable money. And all of a sudden, well, we also owned a tanning salon, okay, and made unbelievable money. I mean, that was just like having a money tree out back at the time. And then 2008 hit, and guess what? We lost almost everything. Almost everything. But we had other streams of income. We made it through, and we built it back. When Kelly and I both worked at the hospital, and they wanted us to make us take the poke, and then we said no, and they said, well, you got to take it to keep your job. We said, I don't care. They said, you can't, you got to be kidding. You're going to give up this job. It's a great job, great pennies, all that. They couldn't believe we would risk our jobs not to take the poke. We said, no, not going to take it. They didn't realize, they didn't know that, and we got religious exemptions, but then they wanted us to go through weekly testing. Said, no, I'm not going to do that either. I don't know what you're sticking up my nose. I don't know, you want to take my DNA sample to send to China, or what's on that thing? Not going to do it. Well, you got to be kidding. You're going to give up these jobs just because you won't? Everybody else is taking it. So not going to do it. What they didn't know is we had many other income streams. And so we were able, they gave us the freedom. It affected a lot of people. A lot of people had to take the poke to keep their jobs, to keep their family. And I won't go into what happened to those people, but you know what the story is with that, right? We had some pretty bad problems. But no, we did not let that economic collapse us. So my point here is, like we always say, stop being scared of all this stuff. Stop letting the fear porn merchants scare you or make you anxious. Take your life into your own hands. Take responsibility for your own real preparedness, which includes economic preparedness, and build an economic foundation and strength that will make you as impervious as possible to the fluctuations of the financial markets, whether it's war or bank collapses or collapse of the dollar, all the things these people want to scare you about. Okay? The dollar's not going to collapse. Yeah, I know. No, it's not going to collapse. It's going to continue to lose its buying power. But hey, that's life, okay? That's life. You have to be in charge of yours. Okay, all right. Don't be scared. Be prepared, right? And take charge of your life. Don't let these fear merchants make you run scared. We prepare well today in order to live well. There's a guy, I didn't even realize I was drinking out of this mug this morning. There's a guy who has gone through more ups and downs than anybody you can believe. And if you don't know his real life story, you ought to study it. It's amazing. And you think all the things they tried to do, what a great lesson. I didn't even realize that whole, what a great lesson. All the things they tried to throw at him, and it didn't affect him. Why? Because he had prepared himself through his financial strength. Yeah, I have no desire to do what he did. I have no desire to be a Trump. Probably you don't either. But do what you can so that whatever comes your way, you'll be ready for. Okay? Did I already say we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow? Get out there and do it. And don't be scared about it. Just do it. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.